You're listening to the Podcast Detroit Network. Visit www.podcastdetroit.com for more information.
Hello, friends. Welcome to episode 20 of Storyteller Conclave. This is a show all about helping you run your best tabletop role-playing game that you can. Whether you're a new storyteller or dungeon master learning the craft, or an experienced storyteller looking to take your game to the next level. I am Sara.
And I am Rob. We have no direct updates, or at least nothing anybody ever wants to hear about, except for the fact that we love our patron people.
Yep.
They're doing great. We've gotten some new people added to our channel as well, and we are happy to have you join us.
Thank you so much for believing in us and supporting the show.
Yeah, tell your friends, tell your neighbors, tell those aliens that we don't know about and probably shouldn't be discussing on open mics.
I don't know what you're talking about.
That's right. I'm totally confused. Okay, so we have this show.
You know, before we get started.
Yeah.
Before we get started.
Oh, you want to drop that?
Yeah.
Do it.
Oh, I have to.
It's happening.
I have to.
Okay.
Because there was a little spiciness that happened earlier today. Yeah.
Are we going to call this the Podcast Detroit 5 minutes?
Yeah, I think we need to openly state our support and love for Kate.
Yes,
our sound engineer.
We do.
Because so I was earlier today. I was listening to one of the other shows that
was this
records
live?
No. It was one of their older episodes. It was from like the middle of August.
Okay,
or
so this is like deep salt for us.
Yeah. We're this is thread necromancy. I believe they
all
call
right.
it. Yeah.
Okay, fair.
I was listening to one of the other shows that it records here at Podcast Detroit. Reasons Why I'm Single. A couple of delightful ladies, and they share
it's a good show.
It's a really good show. Honestly, I'm enjoying the hell out of it. But
they're fun girls.
Lo and behold, if they didn't chuck you right under the bus,
Like
Kate.
right under the bus.
They're talking about, breakups and such like that, and somebody says, our old sound engineer who got engaged and then dumped us. What was her name? And in unison, they both go, Kate.
Okay, I would like to clear up my side of the story.
We will give you a few minutes here
I'd
of our
like to
time.
establish that they left me first.
Those
They
hussies.
changed their days, and they chose to come in on a day when they know I physically can't be here.
Well.
So I would
how
like to
the
say
turntables.
I am so sad that we had to part ways like this, but let's not point fingers, ladies.
We will not point fingers, not today.
You're all lovely.
Well, I'm glad we could square that away.
At least we got you in the divorce.
So
That's right. I'm
right?
fine.
At least we got you in the divorce.
Now you guys get me.
That's right. That's right. We totally get you, girl. All right, and we will take you and keep you here with us in this Storyteller Conclave. We
Thank
appreciate you.
All right. So that out of the way. That cleared up.
Our 5 minutes set to the side. With that being said, we had an idea of what this show was going to be, and then it changed. Now, I'm not going to say that it's not.
It didn't change. It narrowed.
I will agree with that. So originally we had this beautiful idea that we were going to go right into what of the world scope, and we were going to go talk about cosmology and supernatural and oddities and and gods and things like that. And we started with gods and really didn't get beyond gods.
8 paragraphs later, we're like, oh, this is a whole show, and we haven't even strayed into other story elements. So
we're gonna take this what section a little slower than we thought we were going to, and hopefully, I don't know, give you guys a little bit more flavor.
Yeah.
Because I personally discovered a few things along the way of even doing research for this.
Yeah, absolutely.
Because much as you guys don't realize this, we do a fair amount of research before these shows. It's not just we pop off stuff. We want to be educated. We want to give you guys as much tools. We go back to old stuff that we had. We rewatch that. Sometimes we pass links between each other, which we will be sharing with you again today.
Yeah. No, Rob is great at that too, because he just hits me in the middle of Monday afternoon. He's just like, oh, by the way, here's a playlist I put together for you of YouTube videos. So
it's true.
When you get 45 minutes to kill, just watch this stuff.
Strangely enough, she does get that kind of time. So, but I'm going to kind of preface this with a quote from one of the YouTube videos that we watched, that we shared back and forth and talked a lot about, because I thought it was an amazing video, and I think the guy had some of the most conclusive data sets when it comes to putting this together and ideas and it was really well documented. I think it was really well put together.
Absolutely.
But he said, and I quote, "Religion is complicated." And I think it's true. It's true. Because it is, and it's way more complicated than you can imagine. But he does a good job in his video. And Sarah was like, "Why don't we just give him the link and tell him our show's over? And
Right.
just go with that." And I
She's
said, that's a little rude.
Kate, just roll this YouTube video.
Yeah,
We're just gonna go.
We're gonna sit over here for a little
get
while.
beer or something,
We may
you know?
pause from time to time,
Right,
or
well,
I
someone.
feel like you're a teacher. You're taking like a lazy day. Like, we're just gonna watch this movie, guys.
Right.
Sleep on my
It's when you
desk.
come into class and you see the TV that's strapped to the rolling cart, and you're like, "Yes, video day!"
Yeah, VCR and all.
One of these times we are going to do Substitute Kate. It will be a show. It'll be Substitute Kate. It'll
that'll be
fun.
great.
It'll be fun. Literally, it'll just be you playing like random things that we send you. So, but let's get into some meat and potatoes and actually talk about this.
Okay.
So, I kind of want to start at a weird angle because I put these in an odd order when I originally sent you the list. And because I was trying to figure out a good way to kind of break down the discussion a little bit, and then we can go broad. But one of the big things that I thought of when talking about gods in general is belief styles. And the big one that kind of hit me square in the head because I'd never really put a lot of thought to it was Eastern versus Western belief styles. And I guess I knew about it, but I never really thought about it in that sense. And that is that Eastern belief styles tend to have large, powerful gods or God, who impress their wills upon the world. And I mean, this is, big G God. This is, a pantheon. This is, Thor and his might. Those types of things are big G gods.
Right, where those gods are in there and they are interacting, possibly on a personal level, but definitely on a world-changing level.
Yeah, whether or not the humans are pawns, or whether or not, the creatures of the world are pawns, or whether or not they're just under their feet, while they're doing their shit in the pantheon,
Right,
and we're
right.
being affected by it, And
A lot
then,
of like the Greek and Roman pantheons are like this too. Where
Yeah.
they're constantly meddling with the mortals and whatnot. The Elder Scrolls gods are very much like that, or at least the Daedra are.
yeah, very much so.
Because they're always constantly
Right. And then you have this Western belief style, which is more of a collection of spirits or otherworldly travelers or forces that may not even be fully sentient. They don't directly interact with society, or they do in such a way that they don't. It's not an inference. It's not something that's direct. You can't say like this person came and lit this whole county on fire or whatever. It's more like this force came in, the tsunami, and wiped out this group. And it happened because it's a tsunami energy. It's or the river god.
because that's what it does.
Right. I mean, if you've seen Princess Mononoke, the gods in that are very much just forces that are being actually manipulated by the people more than anything else. And they're not even fully sentient. Like they're kind of just there. And that makes for a very different God culture. So one of the things that I wanted to kind of talk about a little bit, at least in a framework sense, before we got into the depth of things, is keeping that in your head is, are your gods Eastern or Western philosophy in that sense? And I still kind of put the Force in more of a Western philosophy, because it is a collection of energy, like the Star Wars Force, because it's not a thing, it's not impressing its will, it is just there.
You mean Eastern?
Western in the sense that it's not direct on people.
No, that's Eastern.
My brain just flipped.
You got them backwards.
I did do that backwards. Wow. Well, this is why
do
it's
as
a
we
live
say,
show.
not as we do.
Exactly. So, and then to balance that, we have the whole poly and monotheistic belief set.
Yep.
And again, if you've done any religious studies up to this point, which some of our listeners may not have, monotheism is a single God, but they sometimes will do things to be a little poly in the sense that they might have saints or demigods sitting underneath them that are more directly interacting with society, but they tend to have a single point that spreads down from that point, and the top of the point is very powerful.
Right. Or kind of like I was our discussion at over dinner, took place like the Tribunal for fans of the Elder Scrolls series, Morrowind's Tribunal that rules over the Dunmer. I would actually rank them as monotheistic because even though there's 3 of them, they work together in concert and are acknowledged as a single entity, as the Tribunal. Like you don't really acknowledge one over another,
right?
And
then you have your polytheism, which is, kind of a sprinkling of gods that don't have a concerted force.
Right. And typically your polytheistic outlooks are going to be you're going to break things down into different bailiwicks, different realms of influence. And there will be something that will define each god in their own realm of influence. So that you don't just have a bunch of random all-powerful beings.
Right.
But you'll have maybe a god of rivers and a god of skies or, whatever.
Right.
They can really be of anything, but typically you're going to divide and conquer on that.
Right. And we'll get more into the polytheism and the breakdown because there's some interesting caveats that I've noted that made more sense to me and why and how it applies to like 5th edition in particular and some of the other game systems is how that breaks down and what it can mean. So I think that we've got those as a good base to start from, I would say, is that if you're going to start with a religion and you're going to you're going to have it frameworked out, I think you need to have that belief style and whether it's mono or poly. And I think there are some rules that you can put together in your own head of how you want to handle that. But I think one of the things that you're talking about is how society sees that. And that's really where we're going to get into the meat and potatoes of creating, or at least breaking down things that were created, and dealing with those gods.
And keep in mind, like we discussed last episode too, how society sees your gods is not the same as what your gods are.
Right.
Your mortals scrambling for favor or whatever they're doing down there are going to do completely different things than maybe what your gods actually even want them to be doing.
Right.
So.
Yeah, I mean, and this is where my wonderful show sheet here that has all a bunch of crazy stuff is going to start going crazy for us.
Oh, yeah.
Is that in going what Sarah was saying is that your view of a god is a very small pinprick of what they are. And that when I say your view, I'm talking about the creatures of the world that are the followers, if you will. They are seeing a single point. So a lot of times you get these false images, like for instance, Poseidon is known as the god of the sea. But that's not true. He's not the god of water and the sea and things like that. I mean, it is his domain.
Yeah.
But
it's stuff he does.
It's within his bailiwick of stuff he does, but that doesn't make him like locked to it at all. He was literally just said, "Here's your sea. It's no different than like, there's your hill. Everything from that hill to the next hill is your hill. Are you the god of hills? No, you're the god of that hill.
Are you a Breton?
Exactly." Well played.
We bring it right back around.
That's right. So I think a lot of times as storytellers, we get under the framework we get beyond the framework of what just the character sees, and that's what we have to know in the background. What are their who are they really?
Yeah.
I mean, yes, are they a Baelor of the deep? Great. So they're a god of whips and fire. No, that's just literally what people see them as. In truth, they have a lot more power. They have a lot more base. They're beholden to certain individuals, and they have certain people who are their minions. And that's literally how that game plays out. But not all of that is visible at all times. And when I say at all times, I mean throughout history. So without getting into the historical part of when, we just have to remember that at certain points in history, certain events occur, and we have to think about how that is being affected by our god or gods, or if it affects them at all. So remember that your society has a viewpoint, and it's going to be different. And sometimes you want to almost do that last. Because you have to have. I mean, we are good about being
decide
defined.
what your gods really are.
Yeah.
Before you decide through what lens they're interpreted.
And again, we're coming at this from the fact that you want to create a God set.
Sure.
If you were building a world, you've got a story, you got all this stuff, and you just say one of my characters is religious, and you go, shit, now I have to create a God? You don't.
You don't.
I'm going to straight out say you don't.
You don't.
You can literally say, this is what he sees, and this is how it reacts, and as long as you know behind the scenes what your rule set is for that God, you're fine. Mm-hmm. I mean, they could literally do nothing, and all that could just be fate.
Yeah, exactly.
And that's literally works just like that. They're really good at magic because they wave their hands, whatever. But if you're going at this with, I need to create a world, and one of those things that is very important to me in this world is gods, that's the direction we're coming from.
Right.
So, yeah, don't write more, write less, but write what you need to do your story. So, back to gods. All right. So, I'm going to go to my simple start.
Okay.
And see where we go from there.
Okay.
So where did we come from? And when I say we, I'm talking about the people, the followers. That is a typical story that comes out of almost every group. So when you're thinking about a god, was the god involved in their creation? Mm-hmm. Or is the god just above them? Are they ants that were already there and now the god notices them? Mm-hmm. And that's a huge thing you have to ask yourself, because if the god wasn't interacting with them until they were like, oh, by the way, we recognize you, and the guy looks down and is like, oh my god, are those ants? Did they just say my name?
It's a very Lovecraftian outlook.
Yeah.
To have these disinterested, dispassionate, godlike beings that only take notice of us because we evoke their names, and then only then do we bring down their true and terrible power, sort of thing. But I mean, Lovecraftian or not, those are absolutely still deific figures.
Correct.
Azathoth, Cthulhu, Yog-Sothoth,
Yeah.
So
keep saying them; they'll show up, I'm sure.
Is this pronounced Haster, or Hoster?
I think there's an umlaut somewhere in there. At least there probably will be. So keeping in mind that, again, you have to have what style they are. I mean, if it's just a force, it's always been there. Mm-hmm. It'll probably always be there, and it's irrelevant to believe that they have a direct tie to it in some way. They may believe it, but otherwise it's just there.
Sure.
So did they get created by it? Were they already there and now they're coming from something else? Mm-hmm. Is it, what is the world? Another question that often gets asked in religion is, why are they here? And I mean that by the people. They're asking that to the God. Mm-hmm. Why am I here?
Why are we here? Right.
And the real answer to that is because you're faithful in a lot of ways. Mm-hmm. Like I give favor to those who are faithful. Sometimes it's just a matter of you're there. For instance, in a world where the God is an embodiment of justice and following the rule of law, regardless of if it's good or wrong, mm-hmm. That makes a difference for that God. So their followers are anyone who is following the law, whether they are vigilante justice, whether they are clinical police justice or judges themselves. I mean, Dredd follows the law.
Yep.
I assure you he murders lots of people and makes judgment determinations all the time. But I'm sure the God of Justice thinks that's the bomb.
He is the law.
Exactly. So the why has to come in there mm-hmm. in direction to the God. So always keep kind of that thing. And then the one thing that always gets asked, and I think this is neat, and because sometimes there isn't a good answer for it, is what happens when they die?
Yeah.
Like when your follower dies, do they end up with the God? I can say that if I was like, I don't know, some omnipresent thing that was being worshipped, would I really want all of my followers sitting at my feet?
And when you're
wanting more,
especially if you're in a polytheistic religion, what defines a follower?
Correct.
I mean, what if I worship 7 different gods?
Right.
Which one do I go to?
Correct. Correct.
Or is there just kind of a collective?
Is it just a story?
Or is there actually the concept of the soul in mm-hmm. your that in the sense that it has a connection to the divine,
right?
In your setting, maybe your gods don't have anything we could conceive of as a heaven or hell,
right?
maybe there is no afterlife, but these are questions that you do need to kind of address, because eventually someone's going to die.
Yeah.
And whether it's one of your characters or whether it's just part of your history, now?
Did you write all of the character sheets up on flash paper so that at that advent you can just light it and watch it go right away?
New idea, by the way. So our next game, I'm gonna have a little surprise for you.
If your character dies, poof, character sheet's gone. So, I mean, and then you have to think about, like, is your god finite enough that they have a rule set? Like an actual defined rule set that they recognize, meaning they recognize the difference between murder and self-defense, or they recognize the difference between, good and evil, because there's a root to it.
Sure.
I think that gets kind of gray in some stories. Like, I will honestly say, you watch something like Buffy, the TV series, and you go, there's a lot of gray in here, and yet they deal with gods and demons.
Sure.
Where's good and evil? And the answer is, by the end of that, you don't know. It's really, really gray. So I think that
you start having to delve into a lot of philosophical questions, especially when you start doing that. And it's worth giving at least a cursory thought to. Do your gods or God adhere to traditional views of good and evil? Are there things that we might think fall on one side or the other of that spectrum that they don't?
Yeah.
Are there little rituals and stuff like that should or should not be observed?
Right.
Are there places you cannot tread because it's sacred, or foods you cannot eat because they are forbidden?
Right.
Or words that you must say because they are sacred?
And how much of that is traditions that have been laid down? Like, Judaism did a good job of that in creating traditions that kept people safe. At the same time, we have pagan rituals that have been wrapped into other faiths over years because that's how conversion occurred. And you've got things like Christmas, which is a set of traditions, but we're not still doing it for the same reasons. But are we? And that's where it gets a little gray in what is a tradition that is done by the people versus what does the God recognize. One of the good ones that I thought was really interesting was in Terry Pratchett's Discworld. The Hog Father is a character. He's basically like a pig version of Father Christmas. And he goes around and gives gifts and rides on this cart driven by war pigs, basically. But he is being rubbed out of the universe. And Death recognizes that if he dies, that sets a really kind of bad thing. And how does one God die? And that made an interesting question when I was listening to some of these things, was that sometimes it isn't described the power of a god. I think the term is monotheia, where does your god live and die by their followers? Is it based upon the power in society? Or by the strength and fervence of the followers? Can another god usurp and take their mantle? These are hard questions. But in the case of him, basically, if he were to have perished, something else would be lost. And that is that really he didn't represent Christmas so much as he represented wonder. And that's something that's kind of intangible. It's not something that any of us can fathom or quantify or grind out of a human's body. There's no wonder that's going to be left over. So if he dies, we lose wonder. And well, what does that mean? Does the sun doesn't rise? And of course, a giant flaming ball rises. Okay, well, isn't that the sun? No, that's the name that was given to it by the people who wondered about what it was. And that's the key that was to that. And I thought that was a beautiful way of putting it. But I think it adds a lot of credence to what happens when a god dissipates or leaves or is no longer important.
They could quite possibly take their bailiwick with them.
Correct. Or do you have something like Forgotten Realms where they're replaced? There are no such things as vacuums.
Right.
Oh, I'm sorry, the goddess of magic is gone. Oh, look at you. You look like you're a good one.
Okay, first off, Helm did what was right, okay? I will die on that hill, okay?
That's your hill.
Mr. had it coming. But you saw repercussions to that in the
100%.
world, though. You
100%.
saw, there was the spell plague, I think it was called.
I believe so.
I'm sure my boyfriend is at home right now furiously
You know what?
typing. And,
Somebody will furiously type us at some point tonight.
yeah,
so.
hit me up in live show chat if you remember what it is, just so I can get that right on the record. But yeah, but you saw that, Helm, the god of protection, destroyed the goddess of magic, Mystra.
Yes.
And suddenly all the magic in the world went freaking bonkers.
Sideways, at least.
Effing bananas.
Yeah.
And, until...
Mythal? Is that... No, Mythals were the... I know Mythals were involved. My brain is totally lost. I'm literally waiting for Overwatch to slam us with a whole list of shit here. So...
fire all of his Mythals at you?
Exactly. All Mythals will be fired.
But you did see hard repercussions of that.
Yeah.
Because nobody was tending that bailiwick of magic.
Right.
So it's a good example of what things could happen.
And also, that's not a bad way to adapt a story. Oh, here it comes.
Overwatch says spell plague is correct.
Awesome.
But that was when Mystra was assassinated by Shar and Sarek.
Oh, Sarah. Okay, that makes sense. Thank you, sir.
Okay.
Thank you. But that also is a really good storytelling tool. I mean, if you've gotten yourself, and we've all done it, put ourselves into a storyline where this is how things are going, and then you're like, oh no, my characters are doing weird things and I don't want it to go that direction. There is no reason why a god can't have a problem.
Sure.
And suddenly the world shifts because of it.
I'm reminded of Pierce Anthony's Incarnations of Immortality series.
Okay.
The very first book is called On a Pale Horse. It's about the incarnation of death.
Oh.
And it opens with the main character. He was at a very low point in his life. He was about to take his own life. He had the gun to his head. And in the very last instant when death stepped in to seize his soul, he had a second thought after looking upon the face of death and shot death instead.
And got him.
Because death had gotten sloppy and was not fully protected at the time and took his life. And so then he had to step into the mantle and learn how to be death. And, of course, like any other mortal, he was very, not very into taking the souls of the living, because he didn't want to hurt anybody.
Right.
What he didn't realize is that while he was not doing his job, people were suffering but not dying.
Right.
And he understood very quickly that it is a necessary function in the universe and started doing his thing. But sure, if death isn't willing to step up and do his job, what happens?
Right.
People don't die. Okay. What does that mean for your world,
Yeah, and that again, when you have shifts like that, it can cause other things as well besides the rippling effect of just magic itself, but also deviations within the followers.
Yep.
Now, that obviously can happen based on a couple of things, and geography, how old the faith is, how many follows there are, can all determine on whether or not there is a good framework for change. Obviously, if you've only got a few small devout followers, there's not going to be much dissension between them, and any dissension probably will be either murdered or silenced. Whereas if you have a giant map of people spread out across the globe, with this same monotheistic belief, they're probably going to have some different feelings over time.
Yeah.
You're going to get Protestants, who are saying this isn't the way I read this scripture, or how I interpreted this action, or saw this God. I mean, we saw that in 7C with the different prophets. Each prophet had a different approach, and by the time we got to the third and fourth, the third prophet, they were like, wait a second, I don't understand why this guy's even talking like this. And so you had people who protested it, and it created a deep divide within the world. But then there was a lot of time that spanned over that, but not a ton, I would say, in game terms, I would say, and in world terms in general. So I think when you talk about that deviation, the bigger and longer your faiths have been around, I think the more deviation can occur.
Oh, absolutely.
The way people see it.
The more minds you've got, dealing in your religion, the more mouths you've got talking about your religion, the more different ideas you're going to be hearing from it.
Right. Except you threw one more thing in here at me, and I thought it was really cool, which is immortals. And I think they press into this concept of where gods and people are and how immortals see themselves differently. And I think that's really cool.
Yeah, I mean, I was using more immortals to kind of catch-all phrase of like what we may refer to as deities or gods or anything like that.
But I think to a degree you've got that step in between, I would say, mortals, immortals, demigods, and gods. And I think we see that immortals are sometimes gods, and sometimes they're not, and sometimes they ascend.
Well, when you transcend life and death, there's a lot of the motivations and a lot of the really motivations that we go about in our daily mortal lives. If you were not constrained by death, think of how everything you do in your life would change.
Play any game of Borderlands.
Yeah, pretty much.
I mean, you're not constrained by death, only money.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, it's sad to say it, but you're a god in that game.
But I put that in there more to discuss just the fact that they operate on a different level of reality than us.
Correct.
Immortal on up through deity. They exist above our conception of reality. And so a lot of stuff you write about them doesn't have to make sense. In fact, I would say it probably makes better world building if it makes no sense at all. And you can read a lot of stuff about, say, like Greek myths and stuff. Greek myths are a great place to look into how a polytheistic religion that is just completely insane in a lot of ways.
And power hungry.
And they're all, gods birthing other gods and interacting with mortals and turning them into weird creatures because they looked at them cross-eyed
and then fighting with each other.
Yeah.
But no death per se, maybe transformation.
Right. And so what we have to understand is that sure, this may sound like Olympus 90210, but
which it can be,
which it really can be. It sounds like a big soap opera, real gods of Olympus. But at the same time, you have to understand that a lot of what we're trying to conceive of as mortals is happening on a much broader, much higher, much metaphysical level than we can conceive. We as mortals will take things and put them in little boxes so that we can understand them.
Almost make it geometric in the sense that we can note all angles, we know what it looks like, we can touch it, we can sense it. It is part of our world.
Right.
It is finite.
Right.
For all terms.
So we're going to stick labels on things, and then that label's going to get passed down through oral tradition to other people, and pretty soon this god ate the other god. Well, that's not really what happened. I mean, they kind of consumed the god's essence, but yeah, sure, I guess ate is an okay word for it.
Exactly.
And it brings to mind like a story of like from the Elder Scrolls series of the god Trinimac. If anybody knows that, he was one of the Atata, which were before they split into the Aedra and Daedra. But I digress. And he was kind of a warrior god, but there was this other god that was kind of the god of conquest named Boethia, who basically decided to take him down a peg and conquered him. Bested him in battle, and as the story goes, ate him.
Consumed.
Like literally swallowed him whole.
Yeah.
Kind of. But in other stories, like she was just wearing his skin or something. But like, again, these are conceptions of what really happened. I'm sure on a metaphysical level, that's not really what happened.
Right.
Then she wore his face and appeared to his followers.
Right. So there was a power transfer.
There was a power transfer.
If you will.
She was then able to masquerade herself through dreams and portents as Trinimac and spread lies amongst his clergy. And kind of in her big reveal to kind of dunk on Trinimac for one and all, she then essentially tore off her Trinimac mask and said, "Ha, it was me the whole time." But again, what are these things happening on a mortal level?
Right.
That then the real kicker to the story is then most stories say that she excreted Trinimac, literally shat him out.
She was done with what she had chewed on.
Right. But again, what is really happening there?
Right.
And then the god that came out the other side was changed and became the god of vengeance, Malakath.
Right.
So, again, what is we know what stories mortals tell about it.
Right.
What truly happened there? You
Right.
know? I'm sure Boethia didn't really kill and eat Trinimac and then
No.
poop out Malakath.
No,
you know?
she took the mantle and took the power,
Mhm.
and then at the end was just like, I'm done with this game. I've conquered it. I am done here. And what came out the other side after it was a broken version of the original.
Exactly.
Because it was spent and it became something different, which then created vengeance. And that makes sense that you have this transformation of something that is divine in order, conquest. It is a divine thing. Conquest over battle creates envy and an anger, if you will, which is where vengeance comes from.
Yep.
So in a storytelling sense, you're basically teaching someone that if you are a bully to someone else,
You may create a wrathful monster on the other side. Yeah.
correct. So it's a beautiful story in the telling on the other side, but at the same time, it's simplistic and symbolistic, and has a symbolism that puts forth this image that's simple, wrapped in this weird kind of storytelling
Yeah, exactly.
of its own.
So, don't be afraid to, write some real soap opera-ish stories for your gods.
Yeah.
Because honestly, they make for real cool storytelling like that.
So to bring it down from there, because we've talked about the gods. If you're going to create a universe, do it, but have some decent framework. Those are some guidelines that we found really good. Again, I'm going to put out a link that kind of talks about, that gives that if you want to go into deep dive, this guy's gone crazy.
Oh, he really has.
But it's beautiful. It's really well done. But down from that is, why are there gods? What really drove your people to dictate? Now, a lot of times it's dictated by their living conditions. I pray to the god of water or rain clouds because I live in a desert. And if it doesn't rain, people die. I die.
Well, I think on top of that, actually, you really have to think about cause and effect there.
Right.
I mean, why are there gods? Are there gods because people prayed to the river and the river became a god because enough people were praying to it?
Sure.
Or was there legitimately a god of the river and people understood that and
Exactly.
prayed to it because they found it?
Exactly.
And because the river provided for them, they now
There you
worship it.
And I think that's where you can dictate that line of where your start point is. That if you're one of those people who like creating the map first and creating your little towns and your villages and saying, okay, what do I know about this village? Well, it's right next to a river that comes out of the mountains. Does it flood ever? Do those people know why it floods? How long have they maybe prayed that it wouldn't? And so a lot of times your society can shape their view of a god. There's a reason why something's called a volcano. We have that word because
Of the god Vulcan.
correct.
Yep.
Now, was Vulcan created before they had their first volcanic eruption? Was it a term and then someone's like, oh, look at how angry that thing is. That's got to be a god. That sound, that thunder, that comes into question. And I think that itself helps you determine what you have. Economic decline, famine, poverty, mass death, earthquakes, things like this are great for early creatures to make determinations from that perspective on what a god might be or what's going on. We believe that the thunder in the heavens is the gods fighting. And the lightning that comes down are the mist strikes that Thor or Odin the Orefather was throwing around, because he was in Valhalla fighting, and these are the things we're seeing now, whereas on the other hand, you might see the meme where you see the 5 lightning bolts hitting the water and you say it hated all those fish and that one dude, So it's all about perception. And so if you're going to go from the perception angle of my people create my gods, start taking a look at what affects your society. What do they have on it?
What do they hold value in?
Right.
Yep. And what are their lifelines to survival? Because that's the first thing you're going to pray to.
Exactly.
If you live along a river and your entire livelihood comes from that river flooding and fertilizing your crops and providing fish in the off season, then you damn well better believe that that river is their god.
And there's going to be a strong name for the river and for the river god. Sometimes part and parcel.
And kind of like we discussed before, sometimes it doesn't come out of favor, but it comes out of fear.
Yeah.
So if they're, say, desert people, the sun is the thing that kills you.
Yeah.
And so the sun very well might become God for those nomadic people,
And in the evening, it's the thing you wish would come back up because it's so damn cold.
Yep.
So now all of that is great, but how do you express that in game? How do you express your gods to your players? Now, a lot of times there's some heavy-handed narrative exposition that can be given out.
Yeah.
I've seen people write, literally multi-page novels on what the history of their gods are in great detail, but
Not
really,
important. Not important.
Unless they're lore masters and they know a lot of the details that society has brought forth, they really don't know how those gods were created. They're just
So,
stories.
The big rule in storytelling is show me, don't tell me.
Right.
And so what you want to do is religion is something that is ingrained in society. Okay. So kind of like we discussed in our last episode, your gods are going to be the influence of your gods are largely going to be expressed in your storytelling, in your world building through the society that worships them.
Yes.
So what you're going to look for is, do they pray to the god of the harvest? Just a short little thank you, god of the harvest, for the food we're about to eat.
Mm-hmm.
Do they pray to, the god, the sun god when it rises in the morning? Again, just as they're brushing their teeth and taking a shower or whatever, do they look up and say, thank you for shining down upon us today, or something?
Or is it required that every Thursday everyone goes to mass who is not one of these classes, who have to work, and if you are not there, you are shunned unless you go to like the midnight one and repent.
Yep.
And do you have to give alms as often as possible? Must you pay a tithing? When you enter the city, do you have to be marked a certain way to denote what favor you are in? Those kind of things are definitely a different societal approach at that.
Are there garments that you may wear
Vestments.
or not wear depending on your social status in relation to this religion, or or to show deference to that faith
Or favor.
or favor? Yeah.
Sometimes it's a matter of, if I have a lot of gold, I have favor with the gods because gold is only given out by certain money tellers in certain situations that are related to faith, or because I'm from far away and I don't even have a clue about this god, do I not have any of those rules? Do I wander around kind of not caring because I don't understand your god? Your god means nothing to me. And that's a totally different way of looking at it, but it comes from a very alien perspective.
Sure.
So the last thing that I kind of want to make sure that sticks in there is when you're dealing with a god that is direct, when there's a power that's involved and a gift, often it's an investment that is given into something to gain. So a person gives tithing, or a person prays, or a person devotes or sacrifices or does something to gain something back.
Refrains from some sort of activity, or
Right.
yeah.
You have to, if you're going to create a give and take in that sense, remember a couple of things. Number one, gods can be anything. That power that they're gifting over, even if you're dealing with like a warlock situation, which I would say is godlike.
Yeah.
It is not, a demon is a form of a god.
They're at least strong enough to grant power to an entity that venerates them.
Correct.
Yeah.
So in that sense, those are the times when you need to set your own interpretational rules down so that you understand in a very simplistic form how the game is played. So that you have a definition when your player looks at you quizzically and says, wait, what do you mean this isn't working this way? It's not working. And the reason in your head is because on Thursday they didn't do full prayer. That's it. That simple. They didn't do full prayer Thursday?
Yep.
They're off the list for a whole week.
You haven't been wearing your red vestments.
Yep.
And it is the month of red.
Yeah.
So,
Sorry, you failed. That was it.
as far as your
Simple
God
rule.
concerns, you've turned your back on him.
That's right.
Yep.
Literally because he can't see you. Mm-hmm. You know, he's a rainbow colored lenses, and if he doesn't see on this month red, he doesn't know that you're a follower.
Yep.
Just a shitty situation. On the other hand, that guy who's covered in blood in his robes he actually can see him. Mm-hmm. And if under the right conditions, he might be able to throw a lightning bolt at you.
That God is pouring favor upon him right now.
That's right. And he just doesn't even hear it. So take your time when you're thinking about your Pantheon. Don't think that it's a requirement. I'm going to start that right off. In world building, it is not a requirement to create a Pantheon or to have your gods listed out in high detail. If your people don't venerate them in any way, they can literally just be something.
Yeah, they're just background notes. At that point.
Where on the other hand, if you've got a NPC or even a PC who is a venerated follower of something, now you have to start creating definitions. And the moment you get into creating definitions, you have to think about who are the followers? How are they following? Is it an old god? You have to go through that list and kind of look back through what we've talked about and create that framework so that you're comfortable with being able to answer questions as that god, if you will, and know what's going to happen if things change.
Yep.
So we have a good 15 minutes for questions.
We do. We actually have time for questions.
We do.
Almost.
And we'll get back into more of the supernatural stuff next week.
Yeah. This is literally this was such a big topic that we had to dedicate an entire episode to just the divine.
Yes. So we will be back to this topic, definitely. But we are going to hit some questions. I want to start out by saying that there's 2 questions we're skipping. Again, Ilime, we will get back to your question. We've marked it. We're going to keep coming back to
There is a whole history episode. Trust us, it is on the list.
We may even open that episode with this question.
Yes.
And Mad Elf, you had some wonderful character class questions that I'm actually going to set those to the side because I think they fit along with something coming up that we're going to be discussing. So we will come back to it, but we'll be there. So I'm going to kind of jump around a little bit here on these questions beyond that. So stay with us on this. So we're going to talk from Technologist's question, which is, what happens to a cleric when their deity dies or is rendered inert? The same question of a warlock patron. I'm going to say this. There should be no difference in your mind on how those function because they're effectively the same thing. You're creating patronage to a god. How does that reaction work? And I think it depends on how you framed the god.
Yeah, that really the answer to that question is, I don't know, depends on your story.
Does the deity die? Do they actually die? Or is it a placeholder, much like in Forgotten Realms, where somebody else is going to get inserted in there, and then things are going to change?
For me, I think the real key to this question is, from whence does their power come? Or I should say, from whence does the player's power come?
Right.
Okay. So, for instance, this question kind of came up in our tabletop game.
Yes.
Because Rob's character is the cleric of the group, and worships the Aedra of Mercy, Stendar.
Yep.
And the Aedra are very hands off. They don't talk to people generally. They don't really get involved in a lot of things.
They're more of an energy.
Yeah, Akatosh kind of gets involved sometimes at major points in history, but that's literally it. You don't really hear from the Aedra.
I wouldn't even say he gets involved so much as he sets a field. He's like, here's the rules.
Yeah.
Do something.
Yeah, he answered Alessia's prayer way back at the beginning of the first era, but that's literally it.
And really no one's exactly sure how that was answered, but we know what the end of it was.
And there's a whole thing at the end of the fourth game, Oblivion, that takes place, but I'm not going to get into it. But anyway.
And then there's the Dragon Ages, which we won't even get into those either.
Well, that's not the Aedra. That's just dragons.
Yes.
But anyways, so the question was basically your character did something that was torturous.
Yes.
Not even
did not seem merciful at all.
The opposite of mercy.
Correct.
You created pain.
Yes, I did. Definitely did that.
And did so deliberately.
Oh, 100%. I tortured those guys.
And you did not feel bad about it.
Not in the least.
It was I made the determination.
Yes.
Because it did cross my mind of like, okay, you are deliberately going against your particular divine's powers here, his particular bailiwick. Should I revoke your powers? And then I thought about it, and my decision was no, I'm not going to, because I don't think the Aedra are involved enough to care as much as to revoke your powers.
Right.
But secondly, I came to the determination that your belief in the Aedra was actually the source of your power and not the divine himself, because I don't believe the Aedra in this setting are powerful enough to extend that power.
Right.
It's your faith, and you are the source of that power
conduit, yeah.
to draw that from your belief in these entities.
So when we say that if a cleric has their deity die, I think you have to determine as the storyteller
what happens to the cleric.
Right. Are they disconnected because they are the thing that they're believing in doesn't exist anymore?
Right. Is it like losing your internet connection?
Exactly. It's like, sorry, there's nothing there.
Or was the real internet the friends you made along the way?
Oh, that's so. Jeez, you back in your wholesomeness. So, and then I would say the same thing for the warlock, without question. If the warlock's patron just dies, it's like, is there just a disconnected phone on the other end? Or is it a position? Does it get refilled by who's next? Like, literally, the warlock's patron, the warlock is, has its demon, and literally the demon gets killed, the phone's disconnected, and when he goes, hey, Balgog, where are you today? My power's not working, and somebody, excuse me, are you talking to me? I was talking to Balgog. Yeah, I killed him 5 minutes ago. Well, currently you're my god then. I don't have any deals with you. Too bad, you're here now.
That feel when you accidentally stumble upon one of the plots in Critical Role.
Exactly. So I would say it really depends on, as a storyteller, your determination on how that power is being gifted to them.
Yeah. I think my particular interpretation of how Warlock Pacts work, specifically with regards to 5th edition, I would say the 5th edition thing is probably a lot closer to what you said. Like, the phone absolutely would go dead. There is no Warlock patron was actually me the whole time thing. It is a deal between you and someone else. It's not a matter of faith. It is I am directly channeling power to you. Your internet is cut, but I think you can switch internet providers.
Now, I will say this. As a storyteller in a game setting, I would, unless the players have an active hand involved in destroying a god, like set things in motion, and it takes time, because obviously it's going to be something. If they make the active attempt to make that disconnect, sure. I mean, maybe the players are actively trying to get this guy's pack taken care of and stumble across a way to kill that demon. Sure. It's gone. Powers are gone. Everything's gone.
Yep.
Why? They did it. They did it in game. They made it happen.
He's a dude with a sword now.
On the other hand, if you're talking about a bunch of gods and then you've gotten it written, like in your story, that this god is literally going to die, and one of your players is a cleric of said god, I think that's a little terrible to do to them.
Because you're literally just neutering their character.
Exactly.
With no real recourse. Because they're not involved in that decision at all.
No.
And that feels real bad.
Yeah. So, okay. I think we've hammered that one along enough.
Yeah.
Mad Elf, how do you handle death of a character? How do you handle the death of a major NPC when someone else close to the player or a notorious memory of the group? I left this one in there because it's talking about death in particular. And I think that when a character dies, I think a lot of storytellers will literally just make up a new one, let's get going, and just walk away from it.
Sure.
I think it's up to the players to decide how they want to venerate that character and what they want to do for maybe a memorial or something like that. I personally, as a storyteller, find it hard because I've invested a lot into those characters as well as a storyteller. So it would be that. I think there's been some interesting NPC deaths in stories that I've read about where players have gotten so involved with an NPC that they find the death of the NPC to be challenging for them.
Yeah, absolutely.
It's the end of a story, and now they're like, "What do I do?"
There have been whole episodes of Critical Role that are just funerals.
Yeah,
because either a PC died or an NPC, meaningful to them, where they were just trying to figure out what to do.
Yeah,
Yeah. very real tears were shed at that table, and I think that's something that you kind of need to prepare for. Is how invested is your group in there? I think there's a lot of out of character discussion that needs to take place. Of just oh hey, I died. It was a dungeon crawl. Whatever. I guess I'll roll a new character and get back in. Well, okay, maybe you don't have to have a big talk there, but just make sure.
Yeah.
Just check in with your players because we do get attached to these characters, and it can be very impactful.
Yeah. I'm going to skip over Overwatch's question about the consistency because I think we're going to get to that more as we go through this world building because there's a lot that is literally a conversation unto itself about their standouts and settings.
Yeah, so the question is, when it comes to internal consistency, what do you look for in a setting? Do you have any standouts that are your favorites or something in the Hall of Shame?
I know I could spend more than 5 minutes having this discussion with you.
I absolutely could,
so
too. That's really all we got left. So,
I want to get to Nox's, and I want to make sure we have a closing. So, and I'm going to
and I'm not going to make any friends with my answers because I do have one in my Hall of Shame.
That's fine. Plot hooks. Building a world seems like a tough enough job, but other than cause and effect, are there any types of mechanisms that can be used to link parts of the world or the scenes of a story and better deliver your necessary information? I think this is a good question.
It was a great question.
It was a challenging one to try and figure out exactly how to frame this.
Yeah. With regards to getting, I think we're talking about plot hooks. So
yes.
I apologize, Knox, if we're not addressing the question that you were trying to phrase to us. I know there was some back and forth on the Discord about exactly what we were looking at here, but I think we're talking about plot hooks and how to get the party to move from one to the other. And as I understand your question is, rather than cause and effect of this thing blew up, so go fix it.
Right.
How do you get the players to move around? How do you get scenes to change? How do you get your world to evolve around them and such like that?
For me, it's NPC interaction. It can be blunt if it needs to be blunt. Mm-hmm. I think there's also your typical thing of hey, we're on the trail. You look off to your right and you see smoke from a fire.
Mm-hmm.
It's dark and black. If your players don't go investigate that, great.
Yep.
They make it to town. Town starts talking to them. Suddenly, someone in town says, comes in rough and broken, and they're just what happened to you? And it's just I was involved in a mass murder in, Alwood about, half an hour from here through the woods. It's a small logging community. We were overrun by goblins and they murdered us all. Oh, shit, And I think your players may still ignore that. That's fine. Plot can run in different directions. You don't have to railroad someone through it. But at the same time, your plot needs to be flexible enough to be able to adapt with where they're going. If you've got a plot story where you're expecting your players to go rescue the princess and they 100% avoid rescuing the princess every time, that's their choice. Mm-hmm. That's the story they're trying to follow. If you're getting to a point where your exposition of your story to your players isn't painting a picture they want to see, maybe there's a discussion that needs to be had there. Or
maybe you need to change the story.
Or maybe you're being too vague.
Yeah.
If there's a guy who wants to bring the world together and try and create world peace by getting all of the dictators at least on his side and seeing the way he needs to be seen, paint that picture. I mean, honestly, the guy's going to be pretty honest with whoever he needs to go out there and do that to be his advisors. He's not going to be all cryptic and be like, I need the 5 pieces of the gauntlet. What does that mean? I need this and this and this. And it's well, okay, that doesn't make a lot of sense. But if he literally says, because in the early days of our society, the person who wore the full suit of armor was known as the emperor, and that is the image that our people hold, and it was given individually to all these different nation states, now there's a thought there of, okay, I'm asking for these pieces, but what can we do to help them?
Yep.
Now you have these stories, these individual plot lines. By the way, that was one of my plots.
I recognized it.
And that's the thing, is that if your players can recognize it by that, they can go and do whatever they need to make that plot happen. So exposition is not always your best tool, but at the same time, railroading is painful for everybody.
So what I'll add to this is reason number one why I ask for character backgrounds, because a lot of storytelling is about creating the illusion of free will. You want to make your players think that they have the choice to do literally anything.
Yep.
But putting attractive choices in front of them so that they can, so that they feel that they've made that choice on their own. So what I'm getting at basically is that, so I ask you for a character history, you hand one to me that says you grew up in this small village and, the village was burned down and these other weird events happened around you and stuff like that. Well, okay. I could either take that and go, neat, you're an adventurer, now go save a princess.
Yep.
Or you've handed me the name of a village. You've named possibly a person who burned it down. If you didn't name that person, I sure as hell will.
Oh yeah.
I may tie that into an existing plot. The weird stuff that happened that made you sprout your powers spontaneously. Oh, we're coming up with a reason for that, and that's also going to be in the plot. So when we're going along, and I mention that the next village up the road should be, this village, but it's the one that's been burned down. Now you are sitting there at my table going, oh, that's my old village.
Yep.
I want to go there.
Right.
Well, no, I didn't say you needed to go to the village. I didn't have an NPC show up and go, hey, you should check out this village. It was burned out. I said, there's this village, and you recognized it because you wrote it. It's involved with your character, and you decided you wanted to go visit there.
Yep.
So obviously I've written plot for that because it's a big old trap.
Mm-hmm.
But, that sounds like it's your idea when it goes through your head. So mostly it's for me, the answer to this is listen to your players. They will tell you what they want, and then you can put it in the story, and you don't ever have to have anybody tell them explicitly, this is a thing you should go do.
Right.
They'll look at the thing that they want, say, that's a thing that I've always wanted, and they'll go for it.
There you go.
Mm-hmm.
It's a lot like little kids.
Yep.
They want ice cream. You just got to figure out which one.
Yep. All right. I think it's about wrap-up time, huh?
Hit us some music there, Kate.
Right on.
So, next week's topic, we're going to continue on with world building onto geography. And
No.
Well,
we're doing the other half of...
Oh, that's right.
Yeah, we're doing the other half of what makes your story unique.
That's right.
So now that we've beaten gods into the ground...
Yes. You can find us on Twitter at @ST_conclave or Instagram at @ST_conclave. Or on Discord, you can find our link in our Twitter or in the episode description. You can also find us on all of your lovely podcasting playlists now. We're pretty much syndicated everywhere, I think. We'd like to thank our patron member, Knox in the Box, who has done a great job of supporting us, along with our other patron members. We love you as well. Our intro music is Beyond the Warriors by Gooey Frog, and what you're listening to right now is Only in Our Footprints in the Sand by Midair Machine, both found at freemusicarchive.org.
We record every week at Podcast Detroit. You can find them online at podcastdetroit.com, on Twitter at Podcast Detroit. Big special shout out to our sound engineer, Kate. We love you. Thank you very much. And our families, Vicky, Sean, all of our friends who've gamed with us throughout the years, and especially you, our listeners. Thank you. We love you. Good night.
Good night, everybody.